Well, December 2nd was a busy day to begin with for us, but in the afternoon we got a call from the ENC, and they asked us if we could take a pump to a patient who was a young child that happened to live in Afton, Wyoming. Now, Afton, Wyoming is about a 4.5 hour drive on a good day, and so this was late in the afternoon, and they still had to get some information for us before we could leave. So it wasn't until almost 7:30 at night that Laura was able to take off and head to Afton, Wyoming. So we knew that she wasn't going to get there until about 11:30, 12 o'clock, and the family wanted us to come anyway. They wanted to make sure we got there that night. They were really anxious. The child had been ill and had had some dehydration issues and things, so we wanted to make sure we got to them timely. So Laura took off and headed up the canyon. And from Salt Lake to Afton, Wyoming, there are a number of mountain passes that she would have to go through. And it was snowing lightly here in Salt Lake City, but what we didn't know is that there was a major storm that was moving through the area. And the farther through the canyon she got, the worse the weather became. And at about 12:30 that evening, she found herself on top of a mountain pass in Wyoming, and she could no longer see the road at all. She didn't know where she was. She'd never driven this road before, and she was afraid that she would, if she continued, that she would slide off the edge of the road. And it was very narrow and very high. And it happened that there were some semis that were also traveling this road, and she started to follow one of the semis down the mountain. She knew she was getting close to where she needed to be, but she didn't know just how far she had yet to go. As the semi in front of her lost traction, it slid off the road. And she knew at that point that they were in trouble and that she wasn't sure how she was going to get off the mountain. She had a decision to make about whether or not to stop and stay there with the semi and hope that they could get some help, or to continue on, and she chose to continue. She got down the mountain just a little bit farther and was met by a sheriff's truck who was coming up the mountain to get people off because they knew that the mountain had been closed and there was no way for anybody to travel that road any further. And so he guided her off the mountain and told her that she needed to go to a little motel and stay there until the roads opened up. And she told him that she had come from Salt Lake City to deliver this pump to this child, and that she wasn't going to go to the motel or stop until she got it to them. And so she continued on to the home and knocked on the door of the home and delivered this pump well after midnight. The mom was just amazed and thrilled that she would have taken that journey to make that happen for her child. So once she delivered the pump, she got back in the car, and the sheriff then told her that the roads were impassable, they were all closed, and there was no way out, and she was going to have to spend the night. So he showed her where the only motel in town was, and it was called the Lazy Bee. And it wasn't very big and it wasn't very nice, but she was glad to be off the roads, and so she stayed there. She called us and let us know that she was okay and that she was going to be staying the night. And we thought that the storm would blow over and that we would be able to bring her home the next day. And as it happened, the storm continued to rage and got worse and worse. And she was stuck for an additional day up there, and there was just nothing going in, nothing going out. Even the snowplows couldn't get through the mountain passes, and so there was just no way for her to move. So she was there stuck in a motel, and we communicated throughout the day. And then we found out that her children, who were home by themselves, of course, because Dad had gone to work and Mom was not in Utah, had a problem. And the school area, there had been some gunfire in the area, and they had done a lockdown on the neighborhood and the school until they could resolve the issue. And we're really glad to report that no one was injured and that there was no harm to any of the children or anyone in her family. But as would any mom, completely unnerved her and us. And so we called to say, what can we do? Can we go get your children? what could we possibly do to help? And she calmly said, they're okay, we've talked to them, they're safe, and everything's going to be fine. As the storm continued to rage, we finally got a little tiny break in the storm, and they sent some plows up the hill to try and see if they could open up the mountain passes. And they weren't successful the first time, and it looked like she might actually be stuck for a third day. But late in the afternoon, there was a small break, and she decided that it was time to come home. And so she was able to follow some plows and follow some semis that had been in the same situation that she was in back through the canyon. And she was able to get through and arrived home here in Salt Lake at the branch on day 3 at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And of course, we were so glad to see her and so grateful that things had turned out the way they had, and that she was safe, and that her children were safe, and that everything was good. And we immediately sent her home to her family. But one of the great side stories to this is not only was she terrific in being willing to do this and take care of her patients, and being willing to put Coram and the patient first and make sure that that patient got taken care of, but everybody here in the branch was so concerned for her and her family that all day long while she was gone, they were asking, what can we do? How can we help? Can we watch her kids? Can we take food? And this major storm had really left the whole Salt Lake Valley crippled in terms of transportation, and yet everybody was just wanting to know what they could do to help. And I just feel like the Salt Lake team has this incredible compassion for people, their peers, as well as the community that we serve. And so I just have the utmost respect for Laura and her family, but also for all of our staff here in Salt Lake, because things like this happen regularly, and they join together as a team and they make it happen.